Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to say hearty welcome, and really looking forward to a very, very special evening. Some special welcomes this evening. First and foremost, to Avi and Rachelle Fraenkel. Thank you so much for coming from Israel and from Johannesburg and from all the trips that you've made to be here to share with us this evening. We so appreciate it, and thank you very, very much. I want to mention as well that an evening of this nature is made possible by a tremendous amount of goodwill, a very appropriately tremendous amount of unity, and a number of significant partnerships that have come together. So I want to thank, in no particular order, Rabbi Oshi and Rebbetzin Zizi Derin from Chabad of West Coast, Rowan Polovin, the chairman of the South African Zionist Federation Cape Council, Judy Byrne, the executive director of South African Zionist Federation Cape Council, Rebbetzin Abigail Popak of Nechama, Barry Pogren, the chairman of Rebbetzin Popak is the executive director of Nechama, Barry Pogren, the chairman of Nechama, Philip Weinstein, the chairman of Beit Midrash Morasha, Rebbetzin Aviva Thurgood, Rebbetzin of Beit Midrash Morasha. I also want to thank Lance and Kim Katz, who are key sponsors for this evening's event, and also Mizrachi South Africa, who are also integrally involved in bringing Rachelle out. It really is a special thing. And once again, thank you to everyone. I'll turn over to Rabbi Derin, who will do the introduction for us.
Good evening. And forgive me for referencing my original home country. Currently my home country is of course South Africa. But in the American elections, not the current one, we won't go there, Richard Nixon saw his numbers sliding in the polls against an aspiring young John F. Kennedy, to whom he ultimately did lose to. And he explained to someone that when America sees the picture of John F. Kennedy, they see a picture of who they wish they were. When they see the picture of me, they see a picture of who they are. When Am Yisrael gets the opportunity to see the image, the picture of the Fraenkel family, we have a chance to see that the dream of who we wish we were is actually who we really are. And I think I can speak on behalf of every one of us here that having had the leadership, the inspiration, the faith, and the strength that you showed us during the most trying days of your life, it made every one of us stronger. It made every one of us take the steps forward on days that we thought we never could. For me personally, I just want to share two quick moments where you touched me. In the context of the parsha we read yesterday, where Moshe shares his almost frustration at the praying again and again and again, and not getting the answer he wanted. That one afternoon during those 18 days when you went to daven at the Kotel, and there was that incredible group of girls there, and somebody caught on their phone when they were telling you it's for sure going to be this or that, and you told these young girls that Hashem isn't our employee. We don't give him instructions on what to do. Until today, how many of my tefillot have been reframed by the words you shared then at that moment? And the other is the vulnerability that you're not afraid to share with us and to make all of us more comfortable. And the message you sent us to the Sinai in Dava. And as you were speaking, I think, at least for me, I just felt more and more distant. This is just somebody from another era, another universe. And then when the interviewer asked you, and how are your children? And you just stopped and said, after a few seconds, I hope they'll be okay. And in that moment, I felt like this is somebody that I can be like that. I want to be like that. I want to be a parent like that. I want to be a Jew like that. And I only hope that everything you've given to all of us up until now, and that what we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight, Hashem should give it back to you many, many fold. Only the best of brachas for you, for your children, of course, and for one another. Thank you so much for coming. And it's my honor to introduce our hero of Am Yisrael, the true mother of Israel, Mrs. Rachelle Fraenkel.
So I don't know if I should speak with or without a mic, so right. Okay. Rabbis are very good with ooh. That's fine. So the introduction was much too much for me, but so that I'm here with my husband Avi. I'll try without, or I'll try with just it's echoing. Okay, without. So, what do you say? Without.
I'll try it. If it doesn't work, you tell me. I'm here with my husband, Avi. Avi doesn't enjoy the microphone that much, and he thinks his English is not as good as it really is. So if he disputes me or doesn't agree or he wants to say anything beyond, he'll join. Otherwise, I'll do the speaking. I spent a week in Johannesburg and this Shabbat here in Cape Town with the family. And before we even start, I want to thank you for being so warm and welcoming and altogether unbelievable. I was never in South Africa, and we learned so much about a new model of community that I was never aware of, and a community that, though has quite a spectrum of Jewish walks of life, still chooses to stay together and stay united and stay connected and stay with one hechsher, one Beit Din. In the Jewish world, it's miraculous. And I don't know if there are two neighborhoods in Israel that eat the same hechsher. Really, we're so impressed. And I guess a lot of what we see our work is done here, but just to say that nothing is to be taken for granted, and this is so special, and I'm sure you know how to appreciate it and cherish it and keep it going. So that's just about how looking forward to be here. I'm not a person for speeches, so during these last 2 years that were quite challenging, one of the great things that happened was that we got to meet and speak to a lot of wonderful people. People from all walks of life in Israel, many Jews from communities in the diaspora, people that come to visit in Israel, or people that we haven't. We're not traveling the world, but sometimes people come to Israel, sometimes we get to meet people. And the amazing thing was to hear from them and to talk to them and to answer if they had questions. So this is going to be more of a conversation. I'll probably start with something. We'll see a clip in a minute. And then the conversation will go to wherever is interesting to you. I have to say, there's no question that's too personal. Just because we've learned how, to walk around the things, we talk about what feels comfortable. We talk around the other stuff. So don't worry about us. You can refer to anything or ask about anything, and we'll talk to each other. That's basically it. Before I show you the clip, for us as a family, sometimes things feel like they happened 5 minutes ago, and sometimes it feels like it's been 1,000 years. And this is for us that we're with, it's the family, and I don't know how it is for you. I'm sure my experiences showed me that we've been partners in something. We've gone through something together. I just want to show these images so we connect to that time 2 years ago. It's just over 2 years. The clip was prepared for the shloshim of our boys. It wasn't a month after their murder, it was actually 48 days after they were murdered. But we weren't involved in creating the clip, so one apology. There's a lot of reference of the families. And our experience has shown that even during the last year, especially during this last, there was a wave of terror in Israel. Every time somebody gets a few more minutes in the limelight, unfortunately it's often through tragedy, but a lot of time it's the family, it's the way people choose to deal with things, it's the people who lost, whether it's a mother in Othniel or a soldier in Polia, and their families. Every time we stand in awe of look at those people and look at this family and wow. And I'm convinced they're just amazing people in Israel and all over this nation. And this is the fabric of who we are. So when you hear the word mishpachot, the families, take it in the wider sense of the families that make up these people. And was there anything else? Then I'll probably start a few words, and then there'll be that awkward moment where I have to shut up and see if somebody wants to say anything or ask anything, and you'll be nice to me, and we'll go here, okay? All right, so we'll start with the clip. Can we turn off the lights?
Yeah.
כל העם אבל יחד עמכם, 18 הימים האחרונים נחקקו בליבנו, בלב העם כולו, דמויותיהם של אייל, גלעד ונפתלי. היום הזה הפך באופן ספונטני ליום אבל לאומי. העם כולו התפלל לשוב הבנים, והעם כולו ראה את אצילות הנפש, את החוסן הפנימי שלכם ההורים. הנה למדנו מכם שיעור שלא יישכח, של אמונה ונחישות, של אחדות ורגישות, של יהדות ואנושיות. עם שלם עמד יחד וקיבל תזכורת מי אנחנו, מדוע אנחנו כאן. ולא פחות מזה, אלו כוחות גדולים וצורים בנו.
עץ החי, אנוכי מבקש, תגיד לי, איפה הם רואים? עץ החי, אנוכי מבקש, תגיד לי, איפה הם רואים? עץ החי, אנוכי מבקש, עץ החי, אנוכי מבקש, עץ החי, אנוכי מבקש, תגיד לי, איפה הם אלוהים?
אני מרביץ מזרחים אחרים, מרגיש שהם ילדים שלנו ורק שלנו.
יש כאן עם שלם איתנו שמחכה לך, עם שלם שמחבק, מתפלל, מייחל לשובך הביתה בשלום.
אנוכי מבקש, תגיד לי, איפה הם רואים? אנוכי מבקש, תגיד לי, איפה הם רואים?
בימים האלה אנחנו עצום מכל עם ישראל. זה מלווה אותנו שעה-שעה, וזה מאוד 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 מחזק אותנו. אנחנו מבקשים להמשיך בתפילות ולהמשיך בכל העשייה הטובה שמורגשת במדינה בימים האלה.
שלי, בזכות הנתינה שלך ללא גבול ואהבת הזולת שלך ללא סייג, עם ישראל מחזיר לך אהבה. כל העם מתאחד.
זו לא הלוויה של חלק אחד בעם, לא קבוצה אחת קוראת קריאה, ואנחנו זקוקים אחד לשני ביום הזה.
וכמה ימים שיש ישראל אחרת, מאוחדת, מלוכדת, מתפללת, לוחמת.
עשרות אלפים ליוו אמש את סמ"ר ראשון שון כרמלי, זכרו לברכה, בדרכו האחרונה.
אין דבר כזה חייל בודד במדינה הזאת. כולם למען כולם.
בטח שאתה גאווה, גאווה.
להמשיך את החיים, להמשיך את היממה.
אני חוזר להמשיך את המשימה של החטיבה, להצטרף ללוחמים שעדיין עושים את העבודה.
הולכים לבקש, תגידוני, איפה הם רואים? אז אחר, הולכים לבקש,
גדול היקר, זהו. אנחנו אוהבים.
תנוח בשלום ילד שלי. אנחנו נלמד לשיר בלעדיך. את הקול השני שלך תמיד, תמיד, תמיד נשמע בתוכנו.
גלעד שלי. כפי שכבר אמרתי לך, אתה כבר לא רק שלי. המשפחה המורחבת הכוללת את כל עם ישראל נמצאת היום איתנו, מחבקת אותך ברגעי פרידה אחרונים שהם לא ממש פרידה.
שלוש משפחות כאלה יכולות להרים עם מתבהים שלא יודע כמה.
People that have anything to do with Yeshiva College know it's the Kfar experience in Mikol Chaim. It's a very special school. It's a boarding school, and our sons, both our sons learned there. To be learned there for 4 years, and Naftali got to be 3 years in Mikol Chaim. And he used to come home every Friday morning. And that evening he message that he's coming home that evening. It took us about an hour to find the message, and we answered, "Rachel, we're expecting you." It was an end of a very busy week, and we went to sleep early. A few hours later, we were woken up by policemen that came to our home looking for Gilad. It turned out that Gilad, Naftali's classmate, was in touch with his parents, and at some point the phone went dead, and they expected him, he didn't arrive, and they started making phone calls, and it turned out that Naftali and Gilad left school together. So they had someone come to our home to look for Gilad. We were sure it's all about going upstairs and finding them in their beds. We went upstairs, the beds were empty. We tried their phone, the phones were dead. We realized we're in trouble. I was thinking about car accidents. In about 2 hours, we knew that the last location of the cell phones was in the Hebron area, which is, we live halfway between Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim. Hebron is exactly the other way. It took a few hours to discover first that there's another boy involved. Eyal was 18, 19, and that actually it's not our little story, but that the whole country has been busy with this. The army is involved, intelligence are involved. This was started Thursday night. I think by Motzei Shabbat or Sunday, we realized it's not even the state of Israel. It's Jews all over the world, praying, rallying, getting involved, calling their Congress people, everybody in different stages. People are doing whatever humanly possible, and the people that didn't have anything practical to do did something very practical, and that was pray and send a lot of support and good energies. Some point, there were Jews that arranged for us to meet with the Pope. It was the next thing on our agenda. Thank God the boys were found before that. We didn't have to go meet with the Pope. But it became a huge story. And over time, when we get to speak to people, people out of the special community of South Africa, they say to us, "You know, a miracle happened to us during those days." And I ask, "What's the miracle?" And they say, "During that time, we were standing together, first in prayer and rallies, and then in memorials. We were together, Hasidic, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, Reform, conservative, so-called non-affiliated Jews. We were all getting together and standing together, and just, we asked the elders of the community if anybody remembers anything like this, and nobody remembers anything like this for decades. Something, it was like a miracle in our community." And we found ourselves begging, "Well, so let's find a different excuse to do something like this again." And it is, it didn't end up the way we wanted it to end, but still, I'll say one more thing and then I'll open it up to anything that's interesting to you. During that time, we sat multiple times with the Prime Minister and with the Minister of Defense and the heads of the Army and the heads of the intelligence. In fact, within 24 hours, they had so much information about who's involved and what weapons were bought and what cars were bought, and so much information, we just didn't know where they're being kept. And during the search, there was information that there were shots. We had a phone call that was recorded. Gilad managed to get a phone call out saying we were kidnapped. And on the other hand, there were constant findings of preparations to hold people long-term. So on the one hand, a hostage situation, and the other hand, knowledge of shots and weapons. And everybody was being very, very honest with us. And to this day, I don't feel that anything was, covered. They were saying all options are possible. Maybe they're holding them, the three of them, somewhere. Maybe the three of them were murdered. Maybe they killed two and they're keeping one. Maybe the shots were just to scare them. Maybe they're wounded. We are working under the work assumption that we're looking for live people. And the truth is, I believe today that if we wouldn't have been working under that work assumption, I don't know if we would have gotten the opportunity to bring them back home. I waited for my son for 18 days. I met a woman called Rachelle. She waited for her son for 81 days. The mother of Ilan Saadon waited for him for 7 years. These are all Hamas operations. At the time, people were saying the uncertainty is the worst. And I was saying, I'm willing to wait for 5 years as long as he walks in here alive. The 5 years were the Gilad Shalit 5 years. And today that we know it was all over within minutes, it's an unbelievable grace to actually get them back. A year into this, we were brought by the army to the area where they were found. It's in the Palestinian Authority, you can't just approach it. And there were a lot of people that were involved in the search and needed closure. So we were standing there in front of this vast area. And this is after the intelligence narrowed down where we should be looking. And I think there's also an English expression of "will leave no stone unturned." There were millions of rocks and stones and caves and holes in the ground. And once again, I realized, and all of us as a family were standing there and we were realizing, first of all, what unbelievable devotion by people, soldiers, mothers of soldiers, intelligence, civilians that were involved. It took unbelievable mesirut nefesh to just find them, physically find them. And what grace of God, what a divine gift it was to actually get them back. So that's where I'm going to stop. And I'd love to speak to about whatever is interesting for you. So, or to hear what you want to say. Actually, there's a microphone, right?
Would you like to ask a question?
Okay, great. This is my avodat hamidot. It's just shut up.
Hi, I'm Hannah Ocker. I just wanted to know, I don't know if I'm going ahead too much, but I just wanted to know, how was it for you to speak at United Nations? Did you feel any kind of response? Did you feel any kind of compassion, understanding, or what did you feel? Did you feel that you get through to them or not?
First of all, thanks for me first. What actually happened was that there was a group of 11th grader Israeli high school kids that were on a trip to Switzerland to learn about the United Nations. I don't know, when I was in high school, nobody took me to Switzerland. But they met with a person called Hillel Neuer, also a tzaddik, that is the head of UN Watch, which is an organization that is supposed to reflect to the Human Rights Council just how well they're doing their job. And the place tends to be a very, very cynical place. And what they get is slots for speakers, and they can use it as an NGO. The kids said, after he explains how it works, the kids say, so why aren't you bringing the parents? And he said, oh, well, but we have only one more day of discussion, and the next session is in September. And we started getting phone calls, something about Switzerland that I was sure it's a joke. And hours later, I was on an airplane. Later, Iris and Bat-Galim joined. Iris never owned a passport in her life. And they made her a passport in an hour. For bureaucracy, that's a miracle. And we went there. Now, even our the foreign minister, right? We weren't so happy about it because that specific session was boycotted by all our friendly countries because it was so biased. So really, we weren't looking for sympathy. We were looking to use this as a platform to get our story out. The way it works is you get 120 seconds, you do your spiel, and then they turn off the microphone. So he helped me put whatever I felt and thought into 120 seconds, and including, Mr. President and this and that, all the courtesies. And they say the environment was hostile, but I didn't feel it because, I was just concentrating on saying this and getting out of there. And then we got to speak to a lot of journalists. The reason this was so important for us was because during the days of the search, we were very anxious and nervous, and we didn't eat much or sleep much, but we were also very, very focused and trying to figure out what our role is. And since we saw that the army and the intelligence and everybody is so recruited and they're doing everything humanly possible, our share was to buy time for the government, because our biggest fear was that the international pressure would force the government to stop searching because of the pressure it created on the local community in the population in the Heroine area. So Ramadan was coming at some point, and we were very scared that they're going to stop searching before. Nobody gave us, everybody gave us the idea that we're going to continue until we find, but this is what our fear was. So going out to the UN was more giving legitimacy to the story. So that's what, and then, you know, what? Yeah, we got to speak to a lot of journalists, and that was the way to do it. We spoke to the Red Cross, where they weren't very helpful. It was an interesting experience. I came home, I told my kids, you see, you have to know English. Who thought I'll ever speak in the Yeah, the truth is, one of my strongest experiences from then was on the way there. I remember during that time, on the one hand, I was saying, you know, you can always break down later. You can fall apart later. It could wait. And on the other hand, there were points where I was asking myself, do you not love your son enough to have a, you know, to have a nervous breakdown? And when I was waiting in line, I think in Israel still, a person approached me with a uniform, and he said something about what everybody wished, and I was sure in my mind that he came to pick me out of the line to say he was found and everything's okay, and I was in high heaven. And it took me a couple more seconds to understand that he recognized me and he just came to wish sympathy. And then I went on the airplane, and at the end of the flight, I put on my cell phone, and I got 2 messages coming in from Avi, and he was asking me about the band of Naftali's watch. And we've been asked every question about what he was wearing, and his glasses, and his this, and his that. And I tried to call Avi, and he didn't answer me. And again, in seconds, I was in the opposite nightmare that they found him and they can't recognize him, and now, you know, he doesn't want to answer me because he doesn't want to say this by phone, and, you know, the whole. And then he called, and it was just another routine question. Maybe they found something and they wanted to find out if it has any connection. And then I realized that, you know, if in a few seconds I could be in high heaven, and then in a few seconds I could be in the middle of the night there, I must be normal. So that's one of my impressions from that trip. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
We live in the Christian Paul and Larry. It was very, very close to us when it happened. I remember Gilad, the son, was taking a trip overseas to Brazil with a whole group of disabled children, and Bibi Netanyahu was supposed to meet with all of them, and everything was cancelled. You know, in my life, I've seen 4 very, very distinct things that have happened in Israeli history. The first was the 6-day war as a youngster. The second was in Tebet. Then there was the capture of Nechama, that's the 6 sons. There was such a unity in Israel, that you imagine all over the world. And why can't we keep this going? I mean, you as the leader, I see you as this amazing woman, leader. What can we do to keep this going, to keep the unity without having to wait for Entebbe, for Nechama, to kill us, all the children, how can we do it? And don't you think that you should be the leader of this amazing movement?
Well, obviously, this is the $1 million question, right? When Israelis say, yeah, we're very good at war, we're all together in war, we take care of each other in war, they say it in a very cynical way, where they actually mean, that's not the real Israeli. The real Israeli is how we behave in airplanes, or the real Israeli is how we pay the traffic. But the fact that we could get together in cases of emergency, that doesn't really, and of course that itself is not true. The ability to come together in times of necessity and threat, it's a big deal. It speaks volumes about who we are. I'll put it, the blunt way is there's so many people getting hurt and murdered all over the world every week. And unfortunately, hardly anybody winks. And here there were 3 kids that didn't come home from school, and millions of Jews around the world were losing sleep over it. So it definitely does speak so much, it says so much about who we are, and definitely about who we can strive to be. After that summer, it started with our boys, but it went on for another 18 days of search and 50-something days of war in Operation Protective Edge. And it wasn't only about walking around, giving out the soldiers tablets and socks and all the amazing things that went out in Gush Etzion, during the search, there were, young boys, soldiers, that were staying in the Efrat, Gush Etzion area. They were taken care of. If something happened to your glasses, there was someone to take you to the Optimum prison and get. It was unbelievable the way people were pampering and taking. But it went way beyond that. People were looking for every old person that's alone in an apartment, every baby that's in the shelter, and even in the traffic lights, they were nicer. But so you're talking about leadership. I think it's way over my league. But what we did feel is a sense of responsibility to try to keep some of that spirit alive. At some point, I might take the microphone. Rabbis don't know how to do this long term, right? You train your voice.
Let's see. Can we do this low so it doesn't? I'll try, okay? If it becomes too annoying, I'll go back to screen. Slicha. Okay. I met someone a friend of ours met Natan Sharansky the day after the funeral of our boys. And he said, thanks, I'm aware of the war. Natan said about the funeral, he said, I felt it was like Ma'amad Har Sinai, that we say that not only the people that were physically there were there, but also everybody that couldn't make it. And then my friend said, if this is like Ma'amad Har Sinai, where's the Torah that came from there? And I thought, months after that, we were in the middle of really a nasty election. And I thought, if this is such a peak, why can't, just like you're saying, why can't we live this day to day? So the truth is, even in the real Ma'amad Har Sinai, while it was going on, we were busy with the Eged. But peak occasions are probably there to teach us what we're capable of and what heights we could reach and what we can strive for. Day-to-day life is always a different story. I think not taking it for granted is a big deal. Like in places here where there's so much good going on, it should be cherished, it should be grown, it should be invested in. I think somewhat of a change of self-image is also significant, because when we're very, very cynical about ourselves, it doesn't promote good. And the reason, I find myself here with the clip, it's not the easiest thing watching the funeral over and over, but, and I say beyond that, I don't need the world to remember my son. I hope my son lives on within his family, within his friends, but I really, really wish we remember who we were at that time, because that memory could push us forward doing good things. It's like, sometimes I say this and then, but during the funeral, there's Yair Lapid, who was the Minister of Finance, and he's ideologically secular, second generation ideologically secular. And Rav Dov Zinger, the Rosh Yeshiva of Gilad and Naftali, they were speaking separately. They didn't hear each other because we came from 3 communities. And both of them, not knowing about each other, chose to talk about the minhag to accept upon myself before we daven, mitzvat aseh shel ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, the mitzvah of loving thy neighbor like thyself. And later on, we met Rav David Grossman, and he said, doesn't it seem strange to you that this is what we should accept upon ourselves? Shouldn't we accept actually something that was in this parsha that we just read, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha? Before you turn to God, you accept the mitzvah of loving God. And then he said, but think about a real family, about a parent, where his children want to turn to him. What would he rather? That they turn to him and say, oh, we love you, could you please give us this, that, and the other? Or that they turn to each other and say, you're my brother, you're my sister, you might think differently and believe differently and have different hopes for the Jewish people, but I love you, and we turn together upward. And then Rav Dov continued, and he said, you know, where there are 2 Jews, everybody says there are already 3 opinions, right? So I want to remind you, Rav Dov said, where there are 2 Jews, there are 3 opinions, but 1 heart. And today, this is where I come back to what you're saying, today I think the 3 opinions are just as essential as the 1 heart. We're a people of many opinions. We're very, you know, we feel very strongly about our opinions. We come from a culture of Bet Midrash where machloket, dispute, is the essence of what we do there. There's this famous story about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. I won't go into the whole story, but eventually when Rabbi Yochanan stays, you know, without Reish Lakish dies, and the Chachamim feel bad for him, and they find him the top student. To sit with him. Whatever Rabbi Yochanan says, the student says, I have a proof that you're right, from there. And he gets upset and he says, I don't know that I'm right. When Ben Lakish was here, he would give me 24 proofs that I'm wrong. And then we would argue, and Torah would grow. So really, it's about what they call tarbut machloket. It's about how to feel passionately, differently, but lovingly. I recently heard from someone something that strikes me as very true. We don't have to like everybody. You don't even have to like everybody in your own family. But love is something else. Love is about loyalty. Love is about commitment. Love is about connection. And if we can keep that sense of love. At the time, I was very, very scared. Was this all an illusion? And will it last? So I had some metaphors that helped me think about it. One was this image of a person walking in the rain, and it's dark, and it's raining, and they're stumbling, and they can't see where they're going, and then there's lightning. And for a second there, they actually see the reality of their life. The physical reality of where they're walking. Then it becomes dark again, and you might stumble, but at least you know where you're at. During that summer, we had weeks and weeks of lightning. So again, I don't know anything about leadership, but this sense of responsibility of let's keep whatever we come from this and grow and make it. That's what's pushing us. We have that capability. It's unbelievable. Any ideas are welcome. It's really such a difficult question. We're so good at emergency, and we're sometimes at each other's throats otherwise. So I wish I would have a simple answer for that. Yeah.
I'm not used to speaking of this. Grief is such a personal thing. And I'm just wondering how difficult it was for you, your own grief, at a time when there was so much public mourning. Did you have the space for your own grief, your own personal grief?
Thanks for the sensitivity. the truth is that you always have your private time, and nobody can take that away from you, even if they want to. There's always the time in your own home, and your Seudat Shabbat is missing what your Seudat Shabbat is missing, and you know, at night it's night. I have a daughter, she was 6 at the time, because a few months later she said, Ima, is it true that you still put on your makeup only when you get to work so you can cry on the way? And at first I was like, how could you say that? And then I said, you know, you wouldn't want her to think it's business as usual. So I said, you know, Nama, it's not like every day the whole way I cry, but I reserve the right to cry. So there are plenty of private times. And I know that when, a lot of times when people sit Shiva, they have these stories about people saying stupid stuff. You know, there's always somebody that says something tactless. But the truth is, when somebody stops me in the street and says something, I don't feel invaded. I feel like we went through something together. And we really shared something. And he was there just like I was. Maybe not just, but we were like sometime in the first year the family went for a few days on, it was half vacation, half work, and we were standing in line to get our passports stamped, and going out of Ben Gurion. And you know those bureaucrats there, they have to keep a straight face and not show that they recognize you. So there was a lady there, and she had a terrible, terrible cold. And you know, she was getting tissues from other booths. And as I was coming closer, I saw tears coming down her cheeks. And I told her, you don't really have a cold, do you? And she said, I'm sorry, I apologize. You lived in our home throughout that summer. And then when I got to Chutzach, where we were intended to get to, there were 3 different Jews that told me the exact same words. So truly, the private times are always there. And the fact that people share with us, it's just, I'm in awe of the fact that people could connect like that. And I really feel we went through something together, and the support we got was a tremendous help. And what can I say? Thanks. Yeah.
It's almost an extension of the previous question on a personal level, because I think as a community we are really very much in awe of you. You should know it's very rare to fill the synagogue on a cold winter's night in the middle of August. We don't generally do that in Cape Town.
No pressure, you say.
On another note, I wonder if you could take us down the road of pain that you and your husband and your family have been through over the last 2 years. Has it got worse? Has it got better over the years? How has it affected your bitachon, your faith? Have you felt challenged? And how have you actually handled it? Because it's, as I say, we're in awe of you. So maybe you could just...
Thank you. First of all, any room full of, yeah, and as I said, no pressure. Everybody came on a rainy day. Any room full of adults is full of people that dealt with loss. And everybody's story is you know, and it doesn't really matter how exactly it happened. We live a lifetime, it's a lifetime of wonderful things and a lifetime of losses. So anybody here is probably full of their own wisdom and toolboxes and can tell us about it. I will share, but I'm just saying, what I'm sharing, it's just my version, our version. You each have so much to teach us. Has it changed? The very beginning, the first, I don't know, month, 2, to me, there were points where I felt like I'm in one of those, I don't know how you call them, these courses that they prepare you for labor, like labor coaches, where they tell you, now just breathe, yeah? Let the wave pass. So there were moments where I would concentrate simply, okay, now just breathe, because the rest was too much to handle. Sherry Mandel, the mother of Kobe Mandel, writes in one of her books that there was a point where she would go with her kids and she'd have, she'd think of something or see something or smell something and she'd burst into tears. And her young children wouldn't deal with that very well. And she'd take off her watch, she'd give it to them and she'd say, give me a minute and a half. Let me do this, right? And then they knew, okay, Ina's dealing with it and it's okay and she's not falling apart on you and she'll be okay. And I remember telling the children, Ava and myself, we were saying, look, Abba and Ima are sad now, you're going to see us sad, you're going to see us crying, we know you're sad, but don't worry, we're not going to fall apart on you, and we're going to, Bezrat Hashem, be a happy family again. And like anybody could describe, things take time. Over these 2 years, I've seen different styles. I personally met a family where they said, in our family, we don't cry. And I think they're imagining their soldiers, actually a commander, looking down at them and they want to be proper and they want to do things right. And it's their choice. And I met a family where the mother of the family said, in this home, nobody's going to laugh again. And then you pray for her, but that she'd open a window or a door for joy and she'd let other people in the family go. And actually it took about 5 years, but eventually it happened. And then there are always the people that come over to you and they say, look, we put a smile on our faces and we go to work for our kids, for our children, for our grandchildren. But you and I know it's just a mask. And the truth is I learned to give credit to that mask because it gives people the strength to do what they want to do and what they feel they ought to do. My personal choice, and it's not, I have no judgment, it's just my little square here. I don't want to walk around this world with a mask on my face. It just doesn't stick well. So my version of it is to cry when we cry, and to laugh when we laugh, and to make room in our lives for the full, I know this sounds, the full spectrum of human experience, and to let Bezrat Hashem joy back in, and it has come in, and it's great. And she's I actually have a mantra. It's my variation of something I once heard. It says, I can feel pain, I don't have to become my pain. I can feel sorrow, I don't have to become my sorrow. And in my inner landscape, there's so many other colors and talents and experience and blessings. And, we could choose to take a bucket of black paint and spill it all over our lives. But first of all, it would be stupid. And it would also be great in gratitude to all the good and blessing we have in our life. I remember this all started Thursday night, and on Friday evening, it was Shabbat, it was a little bit quiet, and Avi and I were sitting in our bedroom, and we were saying, even if this ends the worst, and we were optimistic most of the time, we said, even if this ends the worst, we should remember we're blessed. And thank God, You asked about faith. So, I'm aware of the concept of having a crisis of faith. When we don't get what we want, when we're disappointed, when we're let down, when some people feel deserted or terribly punished. And the loneliness in that experience sometimes leads them to a terrible crisis. To me, and again, this is not judgmental, but to me, it seems irrational. Because before there were bad things happening to other people, and I was a believer, and now something bad touched our lives. So what changed? In my personal experience, it's more about, at least this time, it was about being vulnerable, it was about being fragile, it was about being very exposed, and what I want more than anything else in the world is totally out of my control. So the feeling was being very, very dependent. And that to me is a lesson in humility and in humbleness, or it's a lesson in dependence, and that to me is a lesson in faith. On top of which, where I think I'm right, that there are some people in their life, that faith in their life is like the bedrock of their life that never changes. And for others, like myself, it's very dynamic. Sometimes you feel very close, sometimes you feel distant, sometimes you feel estranged, sometimes you have doubts. The way I feel today, I feel weird saying this in a bit Knesset, but the way where I stand today, I say, Hashem is great enough, He can contain my occasional doubt in Him. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But, I feel, especially with young people, that we live in a day and age where people feel that with enough technology and enough medicine, we're all going to live happily ever after. My family is from Brooklyn. There, they say it ain't so. When we daven, we say, Oseh shalom u'boreh hakol, that Hashem creates peace and creates everything. But that's just politically correct for the original verse in Isaiah and Yeshayahu that says that God creates, Oseh shalom u'boreh ra. Hashem creates peace and creates evil. It's part of Hashem's world. I really feel that Hashem doesn't owe me anything. And even though Hashem doesn't owe me anything, we're showered with blessings. And yes, there's also pain, so we deal with pain. There's a pasuk in Kohelet, he tries to figure out what the world is all about. So at some point he's excited about wisdom, then he's not so excited. At some point he's excited about joy, and then he's not so excited. And then there's a verse that says, Letzchok amarti meholal. And some of the Mefarshim say, the commentaries say, meholal means diluted. I feel like there's when you're very young and if you're lucky, joy is a default. You wake up in the morning and everything is wonderful. And then there's a point where you don't have to, but you could choose it. Sometimes it takes a choice hour by hour, sometimes day by day. If I wait, in the situation where things are a little bit diluted, if I wait until the world becomes perfect again, so it's not perfect. Thanks.
Thank you for this beautiful Yeah? Thank you for this magnificent message and this beautiful idea of such unity and love and a Jewish heart beating. All of us and the time that you went through, we were all very much part of it, as was the whole Israel, as you put it. I'm sorry to have to bring this up, and I don't know what our Jewish perception is. Is there such a thing as forgiveness?
Forgiveness to the murderer?
And what is your profession? Are you a teacher?
Yeah, I teach.
Right. What do you teach from this? to your students? Apart from, all the amazing compassion and love we've all brought towards you, what lessons can we learn from this?
Thank you. I don't feel I'm in a position of a teacher here, okay? I have so much respect to each one of you. I didn't have to teach anything. If there's something that I'm busy with, is more what I mentioned before, this wish that we can live within the Jewish people, we can get the best out of ourselves. You're asking the question of our relationship with the Palestinians. To me, it's essential that I don't raise my children on hate or anger. I recently, a few months ago, I met my son's kindergarten teacher, and it was in the midst of the height of the terror in the streets, and people were stabbed every day, and you can't take the kindergarten children from it. And she was describing how the kids were playing these terrorist games, and then that my son, that was 5 at the time, he said to the children, "You got it all wrong. It's not that way. there's the bad Arabs, that's Hamas, but there's the good Arabs, that's whatever. And obviously he heard that at home. I don't want him to hate any Arab in the street, and I really, we had at the time, we had, in Israel, you know, beyond the Jewish diaspora, etc., we had in our home Bedouins and Druze and Arab Christians and Arab Muslims, and we had in our Shiva, there were a couple of Palestinians from Gush Etzion that came to our home. And in fact, just a month ago, we met them again, and I'm very, very happy to look them in their eyes and to discover real mensches, because there are. That's them. If you ask me about forgiveness to the murderers, I don't come from the tradition of serving the other cheek. The murderers should be taken care of. I am we are very, very privileged to live in a time and age where there's a state of Israel, and there's an army, and there's a judicial system, and these people should be caught and brought to court, which they were. And I'm very proud that we have in this time now. It's not partisans having to take revenge in the Nazis. Okay? When a boy was murdered in Jerusalem, Muhammad Abkhdir, as some hate result of our tragedy, we were horrified, and everyone we know miles away was horrified. There's a lot to say about that. So I don't want hate. I don't want generalizations. I'm also not one to easily forgive for something so horrendous. Just like I wouldn't want on the other side. I don't know if I answered the question. And again, I'm no politician, I'm no general, it's just... You want to add something? Okay, Miss Adley tells me what to add. I'll say one thing. Erev Rosh Hashanah, 3 months later, one sentence. There were about 25 people involved in this organization in Hamas Hebron, and the funding came from Hamas Gaza, originally from Iran, from the Republic of Iran. Specifically on that night, there were 3 people involved, 2 in the car and 1 that was waiting to take care of the hostages and eventually of the bodies. At Erev Rosh Hashanah, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I get a call from the Chabad, from Shin Bet, the intelligence. And they say there was a battle in Hebron, and the 2 murderers that were in the car at the time, that were on the run for 3 months and were walking around with 4 weapons, 2 automatic weapons and 2 pistols, were killed in battle in Hebron. And at first, I didn't feel anything. And then the phone started ringing and the journalists were online, and I slowly started thinking, okay, you knew that they wouldn't leave this world without taking a few more innocent lives with them, so thank God that didn't happen. And then a few more minutes later I said, well, and it's not so bad that you won't have to see them released in some exchange package or see them even in court. It's not such a... And then I went upstairs and I woke up the kids and I told them, you know, there was a battle in Hebron and Naftali's murderers were killed. And the kids said, yes! And, you know, I realized sometimes it's nice to say that the bad guys lost. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned now the kids, and if this is too invasive of a question, feel free to skip it. But you speak a lot about the generosity of how you shared your own experience with all of Am Yisrael. Did the kids ever feel any resentment of having to share so much of their experience with so many other people, number one? And number two, do they ever feel like you were almost being too positive, and even if it was to the public and the public doesn't see the quiet, crying moments, but do they ever feel like it's almost being beyond human?
I don't know. The only kvetching I get is if there's a time where we're not home enough. AB resents that the way I'm putting it. if there's a time that Ima is not home enough, then they kvetch. I know the search itself was a very confusing time because on one hand there was something very bad happening, and the other hand the home had there was a whole festival there. There were journalists and there were neighbors and there were politicians and everything was so exciting and people were and I know that it was a complex experience for them because they were torn. They were having too much fun. And they were also, they were choosing to be optimistic, even though every night, we were very busy during those days, but our neighbors were very protective and they made sure that we get the opportunity to put them to sleep. And we'd say Shema Yisrael, and we'd joke around about Naftali coming back, look what a mess he created here. And we'd pray, and always make sure to end with a sentence, with a verse actually, that God will do what God would see fit to do. Hashem atov be'enav yaseh. And I would explain even for a 4-year-old exactly what I mean. We're praying, we're optimistic, Bezrat Hashem, we believe, but it's out of our hands. So I know it was a complicated experience. And because if it was just sad, it would be just sad. But it was also exciting. And it was also, so many people and so much attention. But in general, they look like they're doing well. We were talking about Sinai and Bala, so I can have more perspective now. There's a divine gift of healing that I see over and over again. It's by all of us, it's by adults too. With children, you can see it in a simpler way. I think this I must have said then already, but a month into the story, I heard them saying, when they were saying their prayers before they go to sleep, saying Kriyat Shema, and they're saying, B'Shem Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Mimini Michael, Mismoli Gabriel, Mifnai Uriel, Ma'achorai Rafael, V'Roshi Shechinat El. It's a verse that describes the guardian angels, and they were saying, Naftali Mistakel, V'Roshi Shechinat El. Like, they rhymed their brother's name into it. And at first, and then what happened was that Shlomo said, but we said that yesterday. I didn't notice. And Noga said, but this is a verse we repeat 3 times. So ever since to this day, they say one for Eyal, one for Gilad, and one for Naftali. And at first I thought it's just a cute story. But then I realized there's tremendous, wisdom, power here. There's not that when they're 80 years old, they can still say Shema like that. And the brother's walking with them. Naama, I mentioned before, she's a character. She told me, now she's in 2nd grade, but at the end of last year she said, there's something good about the fact that Naftali died before I started 1st grade. I said, really? And she said, because he's been going with me to school every day since. There's something about the way they choose to experience this. Probably the worst, the hardest thing we ever did was when we got the bad news, was to take each of the children and to tell them. And you take this blooming kid and you're going to crush him temporarily, Bezrat Hashem, but it's a terrible feeling. And one of our daughters was by a friend, and my sister went to pick her up, and she refused to walk into the house. I think she felt some kind of nervous energy. She sat at the door, and my sister said, you don't want to know yet? And my 11-year-old kid said, no, not yet. And then a few minutes later, she came in and we spoke to her. And her youngest sister, that was 9, it was 18 days into this, so it was already the last day of elementary school. And she and her friend went to sleep by the friend. And we were debating, we were very busy. We decided to let her sleep one more quiet night and we'll speak to her in the morning. And we did, and it was very difficult. And then a full year later, on the last day of elementary school, a year later, they decided to turn this into a tradition. Last day of school, they're going to sleep by the friend. And the mother said, well, maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. And they said, no, we're going to go to sleep by the friend the last day of school, and we'll wake up in the morning, and nobody's going to die. So the psychologist amongst you must say this is a corrective experience. But the truth is, these were 10 years old, these 10-year-old kids at the time. There were the Gilad and Naftali's classmates. They after the Shiva and after the search, it was crazy for them. They chose to go on the Israel Trail. and it's going for 2 weeks on a walk. You could take 6 weeks, but they decided to 2 weeks on a walk, etc., etc. And some of the parents were very nervous. There are going to be no professionals and no adults, and what if somebody breaks down? They just lost 2 close friends. And the educators in their school said, trust them. They know what's good for them. And they walked, and they laughed, and they cried, and they did whatever 17-year-old kids do. And when we met them 2 weeks later, they invited us for the last day. Their faces started to change. And for me, it was a great lesson in trusting them in their own experience, and almost a message to give them, that we trust you, and that you know it, that you're going to be okay, and actually trusting ourselves with our healing process. Because I truly feel it's a divine presence. Yeah.
Hi, Sally. My name is La.
May I ask you, please, would you just take us back to the point in time when you and your husband were
Told that they found the boys, but they're not alive. I know you mentioned how you said to the children.
Thank you. What can I say? We were on the way to a meeting in Tel Aviv, and we got a phone call saying, come back home. And our stomach was up here, because we were saying, if it's good news, they would have told us right away. And just being called back home like this, it can't be good. So we were waiting, and they do it in a very orderly fashion. In Israel, there's a lot of experience with these things. The word is hachmatzah. We felt it could have ended otherwise. And then there's heartbreak, and then the whole 18 days were, in a sense, horrible, but they also had a glory to them. What everybody brought out of themselves was just unbelievable. People were amazing. Family, community, state, Jewish people. Those specific minutes, I remember as a physical pain in my body. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say one thing that I'm sure you know, but it just proves time and again that Hashem doesn't send nisayon to someone who can't stand in it. And I think that your family, as well as the families of the other 2 boys, are really very, very special. And I just wanted to thank you for teaching us that. And, yeah.
Thank you. That's one of the things I'm never sure about, but I won't open the discussion. I'll end by sharing just a little bit more, and then we'll finish. On the personal level, and maybe on the more national level. On the personal level, 1.5 stories. We had an IDF team, a negotiation team, living in our home, and they were our oxygen, because we weren't affected by any rumors, and we chose not to listen to the media, and not to read talkbacks, and we had a very, very trusting relationship with them. And these were people that were very different from, some of them came from very different backgrounds than ourselves, and there were a lot of mutual lessons learned. Just a couple of things. One was, there was a point in time, Shabbatot were amazing, because it was the only time where the gates of the yeshuv closed, and the journalists were happy to go home for a few hours, and we had some relative peace. And in Sudash Rishit time, in the afternoon of Shabbat, the street would fill up with maybe 200 women and girls that would sit and sing, and this happened 4 Shabbatot in a row,
would sit and sing mellow Sudash Rishit songs. And they'd call us out, and me and my girls would come out and we'd sing. And the first Shabbat this happened, the person from one of the people from the IDF team came from the backyard, and he stood there and he saw the whole street full of people. And I think he thought, what kind of religious practice is this? And he turns to my sister and he says, what is this? And my sister says, this is called support. And I learned so much about this person. He's very, very far from my religious world, very far. And you wake me up in the middle of the night. He's what we call tzaddik yesod olam, a righteous person, one of the best. And that was, I might have known this theoretically, but I learned over and over with a few of these people that are amazing. And at some point in time, we were given the option to listen to Gilad's phone call. And we didn't know, we knew the dry facts. We didn't know exactly what we'll hear. Could I recognize Naftali's voice? What will I hear? And I approached this guy and asked him, could you please prepare me for hearing this tape? And he didn't know what's in it either. And he said, well, Racheli, what are you afraid of? And I said, I don't know. I know that during this time I was very focused. I might fall apart. And he said, okay, so you'll fall apart. Then what? And I thought for a minute, and I said, well, I guess I'll collect myself and get up. And he said, that's right. And those were such simple words, but to me they were profound. They reflected, you can do this. And 3 months later, a wonderful lady called Chagit Rain, the mother of Maya Rain, Hashem Yikom Dama, who was killed in Lebanon a few years ago, called us Erev Rosh Hashanah. And she said, I'm just calling to tell you that the anxiety you're feeling now, the fear that you're feeling about being in the holidays without him, Rosh Hashanah without him, Sukkot without him, this fear is worse than the holiday itself. And I heard what she was saying. I understood her. In a way, it calmed me a little bit. And in fact, it was true. Not that it was simple, those first holidays, but it's true. It's not as bad as the anxiety. And today, again, sometimes I speak to young people, I put these two stories together. Because so often, the fear that we feel is worse than the experience itself. And even if, God forbid, the worst thing happens, and even if we do fall apart, we have it within us to pick ourselves up. Sometimes it takes hours, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes more. But again, to me, it's you don't have to speak in the same word I speak, but to me it's a divine gift. We can do it. So that's on the personal level. On the national level, I could speak hours and hours and hours about how unbelievable people are and were and are to this day. A community from Scottsdale, Arizona. There were many communities like this. I know of that, but this is a community I have a relationship, so I like this story. They decided to collect 1,000 mitzvot in merit of the boys. Then it became 1,000 mitzvot in memory of the boys. And I asked the rabbi, did people lose their motivation? And he said, no, on the contrary. We felt even stronger, we want to do this. And they put together this little clip. This person said, I'm going to put on tefillin once a week. This person said, I'll kasher in my kitchen. This, the rabbi's child said, I'll say Tehillim, whatever. In fact, after I saw the clip, a lady came over to me, and she said, look, I didn't want to say this on the movie, but the mitzvah I chose was to date only Jews. They said, for a 16-year-old kid, you have quite an effect on generations. Anyhow, the rabbi says there on the clip, he says, we heard on the phone call that the terrorist says to them, put down your head, and this is our way to pick our heads up strong. And the sense of coming together and caring and connecting and picking our heads up strong could never, ever, ever be taken for granted. There was one more thing I wanted to share. Oh, yeah, I know. Just a couple of months ago, I was in Toronto, and a lady told me a very, very, very simple story. It was so simple, but to me it
it got something. She said, I was very involved, and I was praying, and I was caring, and I was checking. And then my husband called, and he told me the bad news. And I was alone in the house. And I felt sick. And I ran outside, and I was searching for something. And later, I thought, what was I doing running outside? And she said, then I realized that in times like this, a person wants to be with family. And any pair of Jewish eyes in the street would have been family to me. And for her, it was a defining moment, where like this realization of this greater family. I want to thank you. I want to show you a little gift of music that Naftali's friends, Gilad and Naftali's friends, Eyal came from a different school. Eyal is an unbelievable fellow. He left a diary on his tender in yeshiva. You read the things, you can't believe the loss. Gilad and Naftali were 16 years old. Their friends had to finish matriculation exams. They had a full year in school. They had to process and laugh and do whatever kids do. And one of the things they did was create this song I'm going to show you in a minute. And the last story I want to tell you before that is there are a few people here from Gush Etzion. I know a lady from Gush Etzion, and she said when everything was happening, it was so close to home. And she had a 3-year-old, her first son at the time. And she didn't know what to do with the 3-year-old. You can't hide because it's happening all over, and he's so young. So it turned out that in his kindergarten, every day, he said, Ima, every day, we say Tfilat HaDerech. It's the prayer when you go on a long way and you want to come back safely, you say Tfilat HaDerech. And he said, every day we say Tfilat HaDerech because there are 3 children that got lost, and we say this prayer for them. They should find their way home. And that was good for her, and it was good for him, and it didn't need any more explanations. And then when the bad news came, she became very nervous. How do we explain? But the kid came home from, Amitai, his name is, he came home from Gan, and he said, you know, Ima, we stopped saying Tfilat HaDerech because they found the children. So it was enough for her, and it was enough for him, and it was okay. And then a full year later, Amitai is already 4 years old, and they went to a nature reserve that's called Oz V'Gaon. A wonderful, wonderful place, full of unbelievable energy and building. It's a nature reserve that's named after the boys. It was created the night of the funeral. And it keeps on growing, and it's just a place full of life. And in the entrance to there are big pictures of the boys. And 4-year-old Amitai comes over, he sees the pictures, and he turns to his mother and he says, I know why there are pictures of the boys here. And she, her stomach turned, she said, okay, now we'll have to deal with it. And he says, it's so we never lose them again.
Lift up the הלב שרעב חיכו בתמונה השלושה אבינה ורחמים על בניך קולם לדור משמיים בשמיים ניצבים לעד בניך ובארץ תעשה לנו ובמצרים קרוב עליי מרעים התגלו במסך החג שרים שבתוך מנהרות מסתכלים מזימות שלו למרחב הרוח נפלה ישנה חדשה לבבות רחוקים מתוך העצמות הנפש בושה לא היפו גם כשלא לא לשלום הנוסף והעם שהיה מסיעת החינם יתאחד בחיבוק אחים בשמיים ניצבים לעד בניך ובארץ עשה לנו נחמה
Ladies and gentlemen, our thanks must firstly go to both Avi and Rachelle Fraenkel for coming here all the way to Cape Town to share what can only be described as a very inspirational story in one way, a story which is full of awe, and to be in your company, to share the space with you, for me, is truly humbling. And I'm sure when I speak on behalf of the people within this space here, and the Jewish community of South Africa, and probably for the Jewish community of the world, to say that your story that you have shared with us is truly humbling, and we are in awe of what you have done for the Jewish people and what you are continuing to do for Am Yisrael. Rabbi Sam at the beginning said thanks to a whole lot of people, but he always seems to leave himself out. So I'd like to say thank you to Rabbi Sam and to
and thank you to Benita Z, who really did so much, put the whole evening together.
As Bibi Netanyahu said, and we saw in the movie, the whole nation mourns with you. And you have carried message with sensitivity, with compassion to the entire Jewish nation. And you have made, through the unfortunate grief that we've all shared, a whole of Jewry came together as one nation. May their memories always be for a blessing. And may we know no more sorrow. Having just had come through Shabbat Nechama, it's appropriate that we host you here again tonight. And I must say, as we say so many times in the Amidah, we pray for peace. All the time we pray for peace. That's all that we want, is peace. And at the end of every Kaddish, at the end of every Aleinu, that's what we say. And we basically say every single time that he who makes peace in his heights, may he in his compassion make peace upon us and upon all Israel. And as we say, Oseh Shalom Bimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Kol Israel, V'Yimeru. Amen. Thank you very much indeed.